Welcome everyone. An excellent crowd has assembled as expected. My name's Merlin Crossley. I'm Deputy Vice-Chancellor Academic, and it's an enormous pleasure to welcome you all to this Scientia Education Academy lecture, which will be given tonight by a crowd favourite, Professor Gary Whelan, and I welcome you acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. They lived around here for centuries, thousands of years, and there's archaeological remains of the middens and things. It's a good place to live by the ocean here. So these lectures are a way of us celebrating new ideas in teaching and learning, the student experience, and the professional development of our teachers and their achievements. I remember as a student talking to some philosopher who posed this very odd question, which has bewildered me all my life. If a tree falls over in a forest and no one's there, does it make a sound? You know, there's apparently more than one answer to that question. It's blindingly weird, but what it made me think is, if someone does excellent teaching and there's none of their peers there to see it, will they be celebrated in their university role? And it's so rather than the tree falling over in a forest, if you're helping students to grow and bear fruit for society, will anyone thank you once the students have left the university? Will they even thank you? Because many students are shy about expressing, you know, it seems a bit sycophantic to say that was a great lecture, sir, you know, that sort of thing. Will anyone know if a tree's growing? And trees grow slowly as well. A lot of our teaching is slow, meticulous, and it happens behind closed doors. We're trying to make it more available. I'm doing everything I can to try to make teaching visible, because my belief is we've got a lot of great teaching, and the more visible it is, the more celebrated it will be, and the more invested it will be in. And myself, Jeff Crisp with me, and Alex Steele with me, and I know all of you, the community of people who really support teaching, are working away at not just doing good teaching, but celebrating and sharing the ideas. And everyone has different ideas, and Gary has led a team of people who have come up with yet another idea of how we can celebrate and share excellent achievements in teaching and educational curriculum design, all those things. So with that, I'll stop speculating about it and hear the man himself explain his system. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks very much, Merlin, and thanks everyone for coming out today. I appreciate your time. So the title of this lecture is My Education Portfolio, and of course it is a misnomer. It's not my education portfolio, it's your education portfolio. What is it and why does it matter? So for those of you who've just come in, please direct your devices to zeetings.com/GaryV, and you'll be able to follow along with the interactive components of the lecture and participate as well. So I'm currently a co-director of the Scientia Education Academy, and a lot of the Academy Fellows are here today, which is great, and a number of those Fellows have participated in this project. So just to check that the Zeetings is working well, teaching is a profession that could be said to be somewhat selfless, but which of those professions in that list would you consider to be most selfless? If I was a race caller, I'd be able to give the progress here. but nurse is way out in front. Doctor bringing up the rear. Okay, so we've got a fairly stable group of responses there, and it's not surprising that that nursing would be out in front because they are traditionally a caring profession. They get very little kudos, but they do it out of passion and love for humanity. Teachers at all levels give of themselves to help others, but that selflessness also is not entirely unselfish because it also brings intrinsic rewards to the teacher. Now if I had been participating in this survey, I would have actually said dairy farmers. The reason being is if you ask a dairy farmer, they will always attribute their success to others. Sorry, that was a bit cheesy. But I thought I'd milk it for everything it's worth. Okay, so so on the theme of helping each other, I thought I'd show you this video, which is an animated version of an allegory of the long spoons. You may have heard of it. It's quite prevalent amongst Western religions and, in fact, in Asia as well. Originating from apparently from an 18th century Lithuanian rabbi. So I'll just play it for you. So, just to explain the allegory of the long spoons, it was originally about heaven and hell, where people are strapped into chairs along a huge banquet table, and there's a pot of stew in the middle, but they've only got this long spoon and they can't feed themselves. So in hell, they're all gnashing their teeth and starving, but in heaven, they're all using their spoons to feed the person opposite them. And it's about community, it's about the value of working together and the joy of helping each other. So how might the allegory of the long spoons be relevant to your educational practice? What lesson does it have for us as educators? People are typing in very long responses. That's a good collection of responses already. I particularly like the one where students on their own struggle, whereas students in a community do better, and that's been demonstrated often in the educational literature over time. But also educators working together. I saw something about education-focused academics helping fellow academics. This is also a very important component, and the idea of students working together with academics, students as partners, is somewhere around here as well, if I can find it. But that again is another part of the network of education and helping each other as part of being a community of learning. So I think the allegory of the long spoons can be interpreted in many ways, but in general, we all do better and our lives are better when we're helping each other. And that's part of the ethos of what I'm going to talk to you about today. So this, the My Education Portfolio site originated from a project funded by the Scientia Education Investment Fund, or CEIF grants, and it was titled Development and Implementation of an Education Portfolio to Evaluate Excellence of Teachers at UNSW. And the original members of the team were the original Scientia Education Academy Fellows, about 15 of us, and we had a project advisory group which included luminaries in education from around Australia, including David Bowd, Marcia Devlin and Denise Chalmers, and also from overseas, Norm Vaughan from Canada and Helena Gillespie from the UK. And they played an important role in guiding the project. So I want to acknowledge all of those people today. So here's a question for you. To what extent do you agree that teaching and research are valued equally in higher education? I think we can see where this is going. So this corresponds with surveys done in the UK several years ago, which showed that although most academics thought that teaching and research should be valued equally, in their eyes it was certainly not being valued equally. And that was one of the drivers for this project from the Scientia Education Academy. So traditionally, research has been rewarded and recognised more than teaching at leading universities such as UNSW. And that may be in part because measures of research excellence are widely used and accepted. However, there are no generally accepted measures of teaching excellence, certainly no numerical measures that are easy to implement. In fact, when this project started, before we put the grant in, my aim was to see if we could come up with a metric or a combination of metrics that would be able to demonstrate teaching excellence at UNSW. But from the literature review, it became apparent that that was a hopeless task. Since the 1930s, academics in US, Europe and elsewhere have been attempting to metricize teaching. And it's a little bit, I don't know if you recall the scene from Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, where he was explaining to his class how to measure the worth of a poem, importance on one axis and artistic devices on the other, and the area under the curve described the worth of the poem. And he got the students to tear that page out of their textbook. Like poetry, teaching is difficult to capture in a number. And it became apparent from the literature review that the only useful and acceptable way to demonstrate excellence in teaching is via a more broad approach, by looking at various aspects of teaching practice and how we can reward them and demonstrate excellence in those areas. So that was the basis for the project to generate the teaching portfolio, or My Education portfolio. So the project used a Delphi process to arrive at the dimensions of effective teaching in higher education. So for those of you who are not familiar with Delphi process, it was originated during the Cold War as a means of structuring groups so that groups of experts could predict the latest development in military technologies to help win the Cold War. But since then it's been employed in business and in economics to predict trends, and in a variety of research enterprises in order to build consensus among experts to determine the best pathway or the best set of criteria from which to measure or to move forward. So stage one it's typically a multi-stage process where a group of experts are invited to participate. They're typically given a questionnaire either in person or online. In this case it was online, since we surveyed experts in education both here at UNSW, nationally and internationally. And one of the questions in stage one was to imagine a highly effective teacher and to list the dimensions of that teacher's effective teaching practice. So we got 65 respondents, all anonymous, as is typical with the Delphi process, who identified 13 dimensions in total of effective teaching practice. So although this was anonymous, those who wished to remain contactable left their email addresses for contact for the second round. So 13 dimensions is probably a bit much for us to handle. So the second round, we sent out a questionnaire where participants ranked these dimensions on a scale from not important to extremely important, as well as ordering the dimensions by order of priority. And pleasingly, 58 of the original 65 responded to the second round. And the final result was the prioritization of 4 dimensions. So here are the 13 dimensions that those experts were faced with. How would you prioritize those? How would you rank them? I think you can drag them up to the top if you rank them highly. Academics are clearly very politically active. They like to demonstrate. Number 2 and number 3 are swapping quite frequently. So it's interesting that this audience is prioritising very similar dimensions to what the group in the Delphi study did, inspiring students' learning, designing effective curricula, promoting collaboration, active learning, critical thinking, up-to-date disciplinary knowledge, communicating effectively, and designing appropriate assessment tasks were all high up in the rankings. Another one that was high up in the rankings, which is not ranked highly here, is demonstrating educational leadership, maybe because it was at the bottom of the screen. So it wasn't leading the way. So based on the prioritisation, we came up with 4 dimensions, some of which incorporate some of those as criteria within the dimension. So each of the four dimensions which were arrived at incorporated a number of criteria which made up that dimension. So these were the 4 dimensions: teaching and supporting student learning, design and development of learning activities and assessment, disciplinary expertise and professional development, and educational leadership. So having arrived at those 4 dimensions, we tested them with the academy, we tested them with other academic staff, and they seemed to resonate with a lot of staff. So we subsequently utilised our project funding to operationalise those dimensions in an e-portfolio, which would enable staff to demonstrate their educational achievements. Now that is a story in itself. It took a long time to do. There was a market scan looking for existing software. We didn't find anything that was absolutely suitable. And then we used our IT dream team to develop the e-portfolio. So, from your experience, do those identified dimensions adequately represent effective teaching practice? It's like the worm in the election debate. There's a lot of disagreement in the room. So without identifying anybody, I'd like to ask, for those who think it doesn't adequately represent effective teaching practice, what has been left out?
The student isn't mentioned other than in the first one.
Yes.
To a real focus on that. So there were some measures that you had around inclusive and safe spaces, yes, and things like that. And without seeing the granularity of it, yes, that would be the thing that would.
Okay. Thank you for that. So I get that completely. So what you just mentioned, inclusivity, safe learning environments, are criteria within that dimension of teaching and supporting learning. Okay, so as well as operationalising these dimensions, we also benchmark them against existing frameworks, including the UK Higher Education Academy, now known as Advanced Higher Education, Professional Standards Framework, our own Academic Expectations Framework, and the Australian University Teaching Criteria and Standards, which were developed as part of an Office for Learning and Teaching project led by Denise Chalmers at UWA. So the dimensions of my education portfolio align very well with those existing frameworks. So that was encouraging. Also, when creating the e-portfolio, we needed to provide advice to staff about what sort of evidence they may be able to use in relation to each of those dimensions. And this sort of schema is quite helpful in that it relates to the level of the academic, and as an academic's level increases, it's expected that their sphere of influence will cumulatively increase. So at level A and B, evidence of achievement in education will predominantly come from students. As one progresses, there'll be more impact on academic colleagues, and there may be impact at institutional level on the education environment or on educational knowledge, and also at level D and E on national or global education community. So this guided us in developing the evidence base, or the suggested evidence base for staff to include in their portfolios. And this diagram came from Ruth Graham from the Royal Academy of Engineering. So, to assist staff in developing their portfolios, there are resources in my education portfolio on collecting evidence. I'll just see if I can show them to you. So there's quite a comprehensive list of sources of evidence on the website, personal from students and from peers, and an explanation of the fact that as one progresses through one's career, one's expected to gather more evidence from peers at a broader level than at an earlier stage of their career. So also the portfolio contains a set of indicative standards by academic level relating to each of the dimensions of the portfolio. So for each level, there are indicative standards and indicative evidence which are available for each dimension. The aspects which are bold and italicized are thought to be the core aspects that one should aim to strive to provide evidence against. So just to clarify, there is absolutely no expectation that any one person would be able to provide evidence against all of these standards and against all of these dimensions at any one time. So staff are encouraged to pick out those areas in which they can provide evidence and to explore them. Okay, so the Academy are currently working with Alex Steele, PVCE, Merlin, the DVCA, and the Provost and Simmons to align my education portfolio with the UNSW academic expectations. I came this morning from a meeting about this, and the dimensions of the portfolio are now embedded in the academic expectations for education, and the evidence from the My Education Portfolio website is now embedded in that document as well. So the aim is to embed My Education Portfolio in career development conversations, in teaching awards and academic promotion at UNSW. So currently there are a number of criteria which are related to each of the dimensions. For the purposes of promotion, in which the portfolio will be used at least on a voluntary level from 2020, we aim to reduce the number of criteria to 4 per dimension. And yeah, for those of you who are concerned, the criterion of inclusive, safe and supportive learning environments is there. And also a guide to the expected sphere of influence at each academic level. So for a level A academic, an influence within a course or courses, level B at a course level, level C at school level, D at faculty level with evidence of national recognition, E at university level with evidence of international recognition. And similarly for the design and development dimension, cut down from, I think it's currently 8 criteria to 4, and the expected sphere of influence relates to learning resources or assessment practice at a course level for level A and for level B, but more expected innovation at course or program level for level C, and for level D, innovation at a program or faculty level, and level E, innovation at university or cross-institutional level. And for the dimension of disciplinary expertise and professional development, again, cutting down to 4 criteria. Level A, Level A is impacting on their own educational practice. Level C is impacting on practice at a department or school level. D at school or faculty level, and E at university level. And for leadership, the sphere of influence at level A and B is to direct and support casual or sessional staff. At level C, to mentor academic staff at department or school level. Level D, at school or faculty level, and level E, at university level. So I'll just take some time now to show you around the My Education Portfolio site. This is the home page. When people come in, it's a site that's available from outside UNSW, but only when you log in with your ZID and ZPass can you access people's portfolios. That may change. We would like to use this site as a way to share excellent achievements in education both within and outside UNSW. So in the Find People tab, once you've logged in, you can search for individual academics and you can look at their profiles. So when you, as a member of UNSW staff, first log in, you can create your own profile. So these fields that are greyed out are filled in automatically when you log in with your ZID and ZPass, and you can select your position and your faculty and school and enter a brief 50-word biography which sits under your very recent picture in the portfolio. And then you can enter some text in the About Me section. In the very near future, this About Me section will change to Teaching Context and Philosophy. So here's one we prepared earlier. This is my colleague Chintika Balasuriya from the Science Education Academy, and this is his About Me section. You can see that in the biography section, you can put in your contact details, but also a link to the Research Gateway and also to social media. So if you have a LinkedIn or a Twitter account, this can also be shown in your bio. This is another one of my colleagues in the Science Education Academy, Luke Hunter from chemistry. He's the first year academic coordinator in chemistry, and chemistry have introduced an innovative threshold mastery approach to assessing first year chemistry. And this is part of the design and development of learning activities and assessment dimension in his portfolio. As you can see, you can include images, You can include hyperlinks, embedded videos, and other media, and documents such as PDFs or Word documents. Terry Cumming, another Scientia Education Academy Fellow. This is her teaching and supporting learning evidence, seeking to include and engage all learners through use of universal design for learning, and creating a link to one of her Zeitings presentations as well. And there's somebody who you've met before, and this is my information about disciplinary expertise and professional development. And you can see that at the bottom of each piece of evidence, you can tag it with one or more of the criteria. And those criteria don't necessarily all have to be from the same dimension. If a piece of evidence crosses dimensions, you can choose tags from other dimensions as well. And the aim is that the portfolio will be searchable by name and by dimensions, so that it's possible and by criteria, so that it's possible to pull up pieces of evidence that relate to each criterion. And just while we're here, once logged in, there's a little toolbar to the right of the browser window which enables staff to add more evidence, to edit their profile with a little pencil, to share their profile. So after clicking on that link, a staff member can generate a permalink to their portfolio, which is available for people who don't have a UNSW ZID and ZPass, so for external review purposes. And that permalink is available, well, it's not actually permanent, it's available for 60 days. And there is another link which enables the staff member to download all of their content from the portfolio as multiple PDF files at the moment. The aim for promotion is to consolidate that into a single PDF. And those PDF files will contain appropriate live links and links to embedded videos and other media. And don't touch the red button that unpublishes your portfolio. It warns you after you press the red button, do you really want to? So here's a summary evidence page for educational leadership in my portfolio. And you can see that these pieces of evidence appear as very brief vignettes with their tags, and then by clicking on the read more, you can see the full piece of evidence. And also there's a little twisty here with the criteria that relate to this particular dimension. And this is in detail one of those pieces of evidence. So this is my previous Scientia Education Academy lecture, which is embedded in the portfolio. So from 2020, academic staff will be able to use my education portfolio in promotion applications. It's not mandated, but they will be able to do so. So the About Me section, as I mentioned, of the profile will become Teaching Context and Philosophy. And staff will be able to select up to 4 pieces of evidence, maximum of 500 words each, to be compiled along with their Teaching Context and Philosophy into a single PDF export for promotion purposes. There will also necessarily be a component of their education case which is part of their written application for promotion, but it will be much briefer, and it will summarise the claims, and the evidentiary component of their case will be the export from the portfolio. The aim in the long run is for a promotion at UNSW to become entirely digital, with a portal where my education portfolio can sit together with my experience, summary reports, summative peer review of teaching reports, research, grants, compendium of research publications, Boris metrics, and social engagement, global impact and leadership evidence, so that they can all be accessed in one spot by promotion committees, or indeed for academic career development purposes. But that is, that's down the track. So, here's the vital question. To what extent do you agree that My Education Portfolio will be helpful to demonstrate your educational achievements? Well, to paraphrase Meatloaf, 4 out of 5 ain't bad. So, those of you who may utilise My Education Portfolio, what do you think you might use it for? You can select any or all of those. A fairly even spread of what people would like to use it for. And I'm glad that there's a fair amount of people who would like to use it to learn about practice of others, because that's part of the value of the portfolio, is sharing best practice and disseminating new ways of teaching. So, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention.
That was excellent, Gary. I've seldom felt so engaged. I love interacting with all that. And I noticed 1 or 2 puns during the talk. Now, but we've got some time for questions. So let's open it up for questions from the room. And then when the questions are done, the sun is over the yard arm, so there are refreshments. So over to you, people. So right at the back first, Misha.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Gary. I was just wondering, the last point you made about learning about the educational practice of others. If the My Education Portfolio will be set up such that you can actually search easily and through the tagging, whether you can see who is doing what, like if there's some sort of easy system for, learning other than going through individual profiles.
Yes, so thanks, Misha. So that is the aim, that the portfolio will be searchable not only by person but also by tags as well. So that if you wanted to learn about who's doing what in safe, inclusive practice, you could pull up all the pieces of evidence in relation to that.
Thanks, Gary. Is it possible in the system to be working on your portfolio and not have what you're working on public at the time? Is there space you can work on it and then make it live?
Yes. Is there a draft in here? Yes, there is a draft. So at the moment, when creating your profile and creating your evidence, it all remains in draft until you select publish. And everything can remain in draft if you don't want anybody to see anything, and only you can then see it. But once you've published it, anybody with a ZID and ZPass can then see it. The next step would be to have another level of access which would enable your profile or some parts of your profile to be made public, if you so wish. And you could also then make it more secure as well if you wanted to change your mind about that. Yes.
Have you thought how it can be used as time goes on, and so as your teaching practice evolves, can you archive sections and do others? So, because of course, some things you need a portfolio on the short term, some you need demonstrate long-term achievement. Is there a sort of historical way
Yes.
of time stamping and filing?
Yes, so
information?
all evidence is time-stamped, and it can act, the portfolio can act as a repository, and as well as a showcase. So when something is no longer relevant, you can depublish that piece of evidence. It still remains in your drafts.
So I'm going to ask just a few questions, Gary, until someone puts a hand up. Do you have a Wikipedia page?
I don't. I'm not famous enough for that.
It's interesting. I think students would look up Wikipedia, and I think they'd actually be quite pleased to see someone like yours Wikipedia page. It's an interesting thought. Wikipedia is very interesting. You're not meant to make your own pages, so people should just make one with the person sitting next to them in some system. But there was a while ago, people in science realised that female researchers were underrepresented, and it is often researchers. It's not often teachers who have Wikipedia pages, because I think the global reach is another thing, that the global reach is harder to achieve if you're a teacher at a university dedicated to your students. But there was a concerted effort to get young female researchers to get Wikipedia pages. I think it's a good thing. I think your thing is a good thing. It's much, much richer. But it's interesting that you don't. I feel some of our great teachers are far too modest. Yes, question at the back.
I have a question about evaluation, and are you planning to implement some kind of evaluation of teaching practices down the road as part of my education portfolio, in particular in context of people who don't have courses that are accredited and where students evaluate? So.
Okay, so the plan for use of My Education Portfolio in promotion is for evidence of achievement to be judged against the indicative standards for each academic level. So, for example, if you're at level C, you're aiming to get to level D. If your evidence is sufficiently convincing that you are performing at level D, that will...
yeah, I get that part.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, as a part of what you provide to the academics and in this university, it's a very good tool for us to provide you some case of evidence. But if we don't have case of evidence, are you planning to support researchers as providing some evaluation where you go to their work environment? I work, for instance, in a facility where I teach people how to use microscopes. And it would be really valuable if we can provide some kind of evaluation to us as the teachers so that we can use it for our promotion case.
Sure, I didn't understand your context, but now you've explained, thank you. So I think this is the sort of thing where summative peer review, or actually formative peer review, would be helpful to begin with, and then once you've received that feedback and actioned it, maybe then to undergo summative peer review to provide evidence of your effective practice.
Can I ask you... Oh, look, this question, Trevor.
Gary, just from what you've presented here today, it looks like the information that is collected in the portfolio is all self-reported. Is there any way of collecting independent accreditation or evidence that comes into that portfolio?
Thanks, Trevor. So the idea is to suck in from the university systems a summary of my experience reports and summative peer review, but they would necessarily not be publicly available. They would be only available for the purposes of teaching awards or promotion. The roadmap also includes the idea of external reviewers of the portfolio endorsing evidence, for example.
There's another question.
Yeah, my question was on similar lines, is that does it really sit beside the My Experience and the summative peer review, or is it, I guess, yeah, does that get sucked in, and how does it do that? So does it really sit separate or together?
Yes. So at the moment it's separate, and individuals could potentially take their My Experience reports and include them in their portfolio, or their summative peer review reports if they wished. But the roadmap is to do this in a seamless, systematic way, so that these reports would sit within the portfolio space.
Can I ask you, Gary, you're a very accomplished and respected teacher. When you were promoted to professor, had you had an international impact on education?
That's a hard one for me to say, but I did have international referees, if that's
And how
something.
did you find them? Because I deal with this question sometimes, and I'm sort of trying to explore it. What opportunities did you take? How did you develop that networks? What did you do?
It was mostly through educational scholarship, through publication. Others wanted to collaborate, and those collaborators later became referees.
Yeah. Because at UNSW we do support promotion to professor for people who've done educational scholarship, but we also say we will do it for people who've had an educational impact but not necessarily published in the area. And I'm just trying to work out how such people would demonstrate international impact.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I think through attending international conferences, that may be one way, and presenting at those conferences, that could be a useful method to gather international impact.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we should have a university alliance with New Zealand, but anyway.
Thanks, Merlin. Gary, that's fantastic. I've had a few people tell me that sometimes when they look at these kinds of evidence, it can be a bit overwhelming for them. Is there a way for us to highlight what we regard as a level A, level B, level C, level E examples to our staff, so they know what they're trying to aim towards for promotions? I think they find, especially EFs, find it really challenging to work out what is it that they need at each level.
I think that's an excellent idea, Nalini, and I think that could be part of the website, is to give examples of evidence for each dimension, not necessarily at all levels, but at various levels, and point out how this meets the criteria for each level.
Yep. Can I go? Yep.
Yep.
Okay, so this is coming at that same thing from the other side, which is if you sat there on a promotions committee, and Merlin will know this as well, we have a system which has 3 categories. Even if someone is research focused, it's very, very easy for them to tick a box in the teaching bit by doing a bit of teaching, and they'll get a 1 there, and that helps them out. Is there a way in which we can explicitly try to align this to help promotions committees realise what might sit in that research or scholarship section, so that we can tick the box there for education focused staff where they are indulging or whatever, or engaging in that particular domain? Because I think that's the bit people really struggle with, because under the current system you're then left getting 2 3s in the other categories, which is actually quite a tall order for people. And if we could align these and make it transparent and help promotions committee to see where the evidence does apply in that section, it would be useful.
Thanks, Simon. So I think it's most likely that research-focused people will have evidence only in the teaching and supporting learning dimension, or occasionally they might have something in the design and development of learning activities and assessment. But even if it's related to honours supervision, they could still provide evidence of their effective honours supervision under that dimension.
I mean in the other direction. Is the education-focused staff trying to demonstrate they've done something that will tick a box, a research box?
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes. So in the dimension of disciplinary expertise and professional development, one of the criteria is educational scholarship, which could be credited towards research as well. Yes. Yeah.
So look, I think we might wrap up now so people can try to meet new people and network. I'm really delighted with this. I think this will help us build the community. It will help us share best practice. It will help people to take pride in their work and showcase their achievements in a very sensible way. You know that UNSW has the Research Gateway system, and it's about time we had something which is, I think, perhaps even better for teaching. I think it's terrific. But there was one thing that I'll say. You said, Gary, that, so I'm a bean counter rather than someone who tastes the quality of the beans, and this is qualitative. And you did say this is qualitative and not quantitative. And you said that in research, the research metrics were used and accepted, whereas teaching numerical metrics, the literature says they're not accepted. I would maintain that the literature says that research metrics are not accepted either. They are simply tolerated, used. Some of you may have heard that there are university rankings, league tables of universities. Occasionally, they are used by universities for all sorts of purposes, good and not so good, but often for good, even though I don't think I've ever met an intelligent person who really thinks that they're a good, accepted and reasonable methodology. Your talk, Gary, you've attracted one of the largest audiences we've had. I've counted them. We're going to have it online, and I suspect it will be watched by a large number of people. Don't abandon the idea of a numerical metric, even if it is an imperfect one, because it will help some people at some stages. But to rely only on a numerical metric would be a betrayal of everything we care about. So well done for creating this.
Thanks very much. Thank you.